If you've ever walked on a trail through the forest, the really good kind, you know that it's not an easy task. The really good kind of trail is the kind that is a little more remote. It is not a place where people have taken much time to provide the amenities of, say, a highway, or a sidewalk, or even a park trail. It is not wide. It is not paved with anything, not even gravel or wood chips. It is not straight. And no one has taken the time to make sure you encounter no difficulties on your way. Difficulties, you might say, are part of the experience. There are not a lot of signs to point the way, and even the signs that are there can be hard to see. There are fallen logs to step or climb over, or under, or through. There are roots and rocks to catch the unprepared boot. There is mud, sometimes lots of mud. There are very wet places where you have to be very clever and choose your path wisely to get to the other side in a relatively dry state. There are places where the path is hemmed in by growing things, sometimes very tall and branchy things with pickers, sometimes things that make visibility difficult beyond a foot or two, and sometimes grasses that obscure the narrow board that traverses the wetland. There is no such thing as level. The path follows the rise and fall of the land, and if the land rises and falls a lot, well, be ready for a lot of ups and downs. And then there are places where the trail makes a hairpin turn right on the brink of a precipice, or on the bank of a rushing river. A really good trail is not a place where you can just enjoy a simple stroll and let your mind go to sleep. To be sure, there are many things to enjoy: the sounds of wind and water, the sounds of birds and insects, the scents of blue and brown and green, amazing vistas that seem to come up unexpectedly around a bend, the feel of needle, leaf, and breeze. But on a really good trail, you can't get too caught up in the pleasure of birdsong, in the sleepy sound of insects buzzing, or in the places a mind can wander. You have to keep your head and watch your feet. Our journey through life is often a really good trail. No one has paved it with anything. It has things we must get over or get through. Sometimes it takes a little wisdom or a lot of thought to traverse. It has rough patches and not a whole lot of signs. It has ups and downs and sometimes hairpin turns. And to be sure, it has those breathtaking moments and times of simple pleasure. But is it a place for sleepy wandering? Certainly not. Sleepy wandering would make it hard to find those small signs that point us in the right direction. Sleepy wandering would make it hard not to stumble over all those little things that get in the way, so that we do not notice the tiny flowers right beside the path. Sleepy wandering would make it hard not to get mired in difficulties and forget to listen to the birdsong. And the thing about traversing the really good trails, when we do it together, with both each other and with our God alongside us, it not only helps us find the best path through the mud, but it also makes for some great memories. Walk by the river and listen. What do you hear? A walk by the small river, swollen by melting snow in spring, can be a joyful sound. The waters leap and skip and rush. The small river, barely able to manage a trickle in the late summer, is able to carry leaf and branch and log in the spring, and it does so with a fervor that is at once a bit frightening and a bit of a delight, merrily pushing away all the detritus of the past year along its path, whooshing and gurgling. The roar and splash can be heard from far away, the laughter of the river. Walk by the shallow summer river splashing through the forest, and you hear a different sound. As it rushes over rock, into deep pools and back out again, it sings and splashes in the sunlight. Though it sometimes only seems a sheen of water sliding smoothly over a rock edge, its sound can be heard from quite a distance. And even when it gathers in quiet pools at the edge, it always finds its way out again through small openings, with a splash and a spray, the song of the river. Walking by the wide Fall River, which has gathered the waters of many smaller rivers, we hear a voice that seems both slower and wiser. Its rush and flow, even when swelled by fall rains, is more measured. Though its current carries fallen leaves on the surface, other creatures now live in its deeper channel, adding their voices to the voice of the river itself, which is now heard only as one approaches it. The river now speaks of the wisdom of gathered voices, of lands and creatures seen and left behind, the speech of the river. A walk to the river mouth in winter connects the river and ourselves to what lies beyond. Ice rims its edges and forms along its banks and rocks. It is quieter now, its task nearly finished, having connected past to future, up to down, shallow to deep. Its waters now mingle with the waters of the lake or ocean to which it connects, a commingling of old and new. Barely audible now above the sound of waves, it adds its wisdom to the larger song of the body of water toward which it flows, the whisper of the river. Listen to the river and to the voice that runs through all of its forms as it runs through all of creation. Is it not the voice of our God we hear, who sings, who laughs, who speaks, who whispers? May we hear our God in the voices of all who speak in any language, whether human, plant, animal, rock, or water, and hear the message, even if we do not understand the words. We have walked through the forest to the river, and we have walked along the river to the shore. Following the lake shore, we continue our journey. But this part of our journey is no straighter or flatter than any other part. One moment, we are walking along a sandy beach, listening to the sounds of the waves. The next, we are climbing, either with rough stairs or without, holding on to tree, stem, and root, up impossibly steep and rock-studded banks. And the next, we are walking high above the water, glimpsing the waves pounding against the rocky cliff face a dizzying 70 feet below. The path follows the lake shore and moves with it. One moment we stand on a rocky peninsula jutting out into the water, boots thumping on solid rock. The next, we have entered a small bay, where our boots crunch on small pebbles that have washed onto the shore, along with all sorts of other things, from driftwood pieces to actual fallen trees that must be scrambled over or under or through. The weather here, too, is more changeable than inland. Fog rolls in quickly over what was a hazy day, or winds suddenly pick up, pushing summer storms shoreward. Sunny days end with spectacular lightning shows in the distance, and the waves calm or roar with the changes in the weather. Make straight the path, make it level, not without difficulty here on the lakeshore. And yet the view is a spectacular one. We rest on the beach, looking out at a horizon that fills us with wonder. The waves that bathe our tired feet feel somehow familiar and gentle, even as they crash on the sand. The sound of wind and wave is soothing and bears the whisper of something we can't quite understand. Climbs are rewarded by amazing vistas, and we gaze across the lake for miles, feeling dwarfed by something so enormous and powerful that it can swallow ships without a single thought, and yet at the same time, feeling a peacefulness and serenity that trickles into body and soul, leaving us refreshed. Back down again we go, and the joy of picking a path along the squiggly line of lakeshore, over rock and pebble, through branch and fallen tree, without acquiring incredibly wet feet in the process, is infectious, and we laugh with the laughter in the waves that playfully scoot up to lick our boots. Make straight the way of the Lord? Lift up the valleys and flatten the hills? Do we not meet God in these places also? The uneven places, the squiggly line places, the high and the low places, the climb over it places, the dizzying vista places, the rough climb places, holding on tight. Perhaps it is not God who needs the way smoothed. Perhaps it is we who expect it to be smoothed. Perhaps it is not God who needs a flat journey to find joy. Perhaps it is we who think we need evenness and no tripping places to find joy. Out here on the lakeshore, where God's work is evident at every turn, straightness and evenness seem a bit out of place, a human notion, not a God notion. But preparing the way of our God, well, preparing is different, and that probably doesn't mean flattening hills. Preparing means something internal. It might require organizing all the ups and downs into meaning, the climbs and slippery, pebbly slopes into acceptance, the wet feet and stumbling over driftwood into joy. Preparing might mean listening more intently to the voice in the waves, the whisper in the wind, the laughter and the sound of bird and squirrel, and distilling from all of it the voice of the one who runs through it all. Preparing might mean, in the wilderness of our hearts, hearing the faint notes sung to us by a God who understands hills and valleys, squiggly coastline and pebbly shores, driftwood and birdsong, and ourselves, more than we know, and following it inward to the source of peace and joy found there in the middle of it all. Imagine a wind-swept plain, and across it, a single road, rough, unpaved, somewhat sandy. We are walking along it. We are utterly alone. There is no sign of a house, cottage, shed, or building of any sort within sight, and we can see for miles. The grass is studded here and there with small trees and bushes, but other than these, the landscape is plain and devoid of anything but waving grasses. Low gray clouds scurry across the sky above, and a persistent wind pushes at us, tugs at hair and clothing. The road seems forever, up one hill and down, then up another and down again, low and rolling, never ending. We forgot a map, and the GPS doesn't work out here. No cell reception. If we wanted to call for help, the only ones who would hear us would be the small birds clinging to the tops of taller plants, or darting in and out of the bushes on business of their own. This is a lonely place. How did we find ourselves here, we wonder? We had set out on what was supposed to be a pleasant stroll, but this walk turned out to be different than we expected. Did we take a wrong turn? How much farther until things seem familiar again? How much farther until we at least see signs of humans again? All of a sudden, looking down, we see footprints. Some medium-sized animal of the canine family has been this way before, quite recently. Footprints appearing out of the grass to one side and following the road now. It feels strangely comforting. Someone has been here before. We can almost imagine this animal trotting along, neither quickly nor slowly, enjoying the unencumbered movement along a sandy track rather than through tall grass. In the company of this one who seems just ahead of us, we plod on, heart a little lighter than before. How often do we feel this aloneness, even in a world full of people? We may be walking a bit differently than others, or carrying a heavy weight that others do not carry. We may be trying something new, and we feel out of place with what once seemed familiar. Or perhaps a new situation has thrust itself upon us, and we are wondering where to find the map, or the directions, or at least some pictures of what it's supposed to look like. Was it like this for Mary? Did she feel alone? It helps sometimes to find that even if others do not share the road we walk, that someone has walked it before. Perhaps not the whole road, or in the same way, but they were here for at least this part of the journey before. And that feels strangely comforting, perhaps like a cousin who is also having an unusual pregnancy. Looking back on these lonely roads, after finding again home and hearth, fireside and friendship at the end, we can often see the footprints beside us we couldn't see at the time, and the hand that kept us on the right road until it joined a larger way and led us back to the familiar. Looking back, we find we can remember the whisper in the breeze that we couldn't hear at the time, the one that guided and comforted us, that kept us from outright panic. Looking back, we can see again whose hand led that other set of footprints out onto the road at just the right moment, when we needed to know we weren't alone. Looking back, we know our God was there all along, and will be on the next lonely road, and the next, until journey's end. We have walked this Advent through the forest, down the river, along the lakeshore, and along lonely, less traveled roads. Always, though, we have walked with our God, who created forest, river, and lake, sand, rock, and root, bird, insect, and fish. But do we consider that we also walk on this one point on a line that travels far back into the past and far into the future? A road made of interconnected roads in space that stretch onward both backwards and forwards through time. We travel on the same road that people traveled on through the desert, looking for water and manna, searching for a land flowing with milk and honey, sometimes despairing, sometimes hopeful, always moving. We travel on the same road that people traveled on to the festivals in the big city, a there and back again annual journey. We travel on the same road that a young couple expecting a child traveled, in search of a place to spend the night, ending up in a barn with unexpected visitors from the countryside all around who came to see their newborn baby. We travel on the same road as Jesus traveled with his friends, teaching and praying, bringing hope to the hopeless and light to those in darkness. And the road that he finally traveled alone through despair into new life. We travel the road trod by those through the ages who have tried to make a difference in his name, those whose names have been passed down through the ages and are recognized as holy people, and those who simply went about their lives trying to do the best they could, whose names we do not know. We travel the same road today with those who live in fear, in war, in hunger, in poverty, whose lives have been shattered by violence, who struggle just to get through another day. We travel with those whose feet are tired, who don't know when they will find their next meal, who despair, who have forgotten what hope feels like. We travel the same road with people who look, act, think, and believe like us, and with those who don't. We travel with people who do not agree with us, with people we consider the other, with people who are wrong. We travel with the elderly, with the young, with those who are differently abled, with those who are neurodiverse. And this great human traveling will continue long after we are gone. Those who come after us will pick up their part in the tale of years and continue to tread on roads and byways where our footsteps have mingled with the millions before us. Through it all, the God who created each one in love, the God of history is with each one. The God who is both beginning and end. To our human minds, the span of time is so vast, it stretches to infinity in both directions. We cannot comprehend it, or the love that pours out along that string of time in infinite amounts. And so we simply continue our travels, our walk with each other, and with the love beyond measure for our portion of the road, for our time in the story, doing our best to lend a hand to those who need help, an ear to those who need to be heard. And our God walks beside us, as God has walked and will walk throughout all of history. As we walk on this road together, at this point in time between past and future, with every other human who has ever walked it and who will ever walk it, we sometimes encounter the unexpected. Road trips, no matter how well planned, always contain unplanned adventures. This could be the week that everyone decided to travel on this same road, in this same direction, and traffic is stop and go from here to everywhere. There are miles of road work on the expressway, and 3 lanes are down to 1, turning a 15-minute trip into an hour or more. Or going through a small town, we encounter construction equipment in the middle of the road. A water main is being fixed, and there is a detour requiring multiple turns on unfamiliar little roads to get around it. Shortcuts can turn to long cuts, paved roads to gravel. The GPS can fail at just the wrong moment. And that's not to mention blizzards that came early, sudden downpours that cut visibility to nothing, or even animals crossing the road. It can sometimes seem as though the universe is trying to prevent us from reaching our destination. Looking back across 2,000 years or so, it is easy to boil down the experiences of Jesus' family into a few sentences and then immortalize them in song to make them feel somehow easier or less bumpy. But imagine how their journey must have felt to them. Shepherds, angels, dreams, narrow escapes, chance meetings in the temple, losing your child for a few days and then finding him in an unexpected place. One unplanned surprise after another. Has this year been everything we expected it to be? Has this Christmas season been everything we expected? No matter how well planned, every life encounters births and deaths of one kind or another. Meetings and partings, changes in circumstances or surroundings. Sometimes we get stuck in the busyness of life and feel we are not even moving in any particular direction, just exhausting ourselves for nothing. Sometimes there are long stretches of waiting that paralyze us, turning moments to hours and days to what seems like years. Sometimes we encounter unexpected roadblocks and must make our own detours as best we can, hoping we will somehow find the main road again, or at least a road that is going in the same direction we originally traveled. Smooth roads and well-laid plans can suddenly turn bumpy with an unexpected illness or misplaced set of keys. Plan A can suddenly turn to Plan B or C or even Q, and our guidance system, whatever it might be, can suddenly fail, leaving us in a wilderness wondering how to find our way home again. And that's not even considering the weather. Perhaps on our journey we had hoped for sunny skies and smooth pavement. Perhaps we hoped for crisp white snow to blanket the scenery and cheer our cold hearts as we trudge along. But sometimes what we get instead is a cold rain and dead brown grass to look at as we make our way down cheerless lanes. And sometimes this is just what we need. Looking down that road as a whole, through the raindrops and fog, everything seems dismal. But maybe what we need to do is lay down our plans for a moment. We can make it this many miles by lunch, and then we will stop at this particular place and eat this particular thing, plans, and become fascinated by the little drips gracing the bare branches of the tree right beside the road, glistening for anyone who stops to look. Maybe, if we set down our expectations for when we will be at the next road crossing, or where we will be tomorrow, we will be able to see how beautiful the pond beside the road is, as the drops create rings wherever they fall, and enjoy the antics of the ducks, who don't even seem to notice the wet weather. And maybe, if we stop planning how we are going to get around the enormous puddles we haven't even arrived at yet, we will be able to see our God merrily splashing through the puddle just ahead of us, inviting us into this unexpected, roadblock-turned opportunity. Stop wishing for the journey to conform to our wishes, expectations, or plans, and just enjoy this journey how it is, in this place, in this time, with our God and with each other. What is it that we seek on this road we are traveling, over rock and root, through forest and plain, beside river and lake? What are we following as we stumble forward, without map or properly working GPS, sometimes with only lonely footprints beside us for company? What guides us forward through delays and detours, following the same track that millions have trod over the centuries, and that millions might walk after we are long gone? Are we driven forward by some force that pushes us onward, compels us to keep putting one foot in front of the other, step after step, mile after exhausted mile? Or are we drawn forward, pulled into new byways, side roads, enticing trails that seem to call to us and lead us to new possibilities? Or is it a combination, sometimes one, sometimes the other? How do we find our way in all the possibilities of interlacing pathways? Perhaps there is a star to guide us. Not the showiest star in the sky, certainly not the one that makes itself immediately known among the millions of points of light. Not one you would necessarily notice in a brief glance upward in an otherwise hurried life. Just one that burns on, patiently, trusting we will eventually find it there in the wide expanse of the cosmos and decide to follow it. Trusting that we will take the time to stand still for a few moments and gaze up, past all the other distractions and delights this world has to offer, and see it there, and decide that this star will be our guide for the road ahead. Now, of course, being a star, it cannot take the bumps out of the road. It cannot smooth what is rough, nor make straight the path. It cannot account for a fallen tree blocking the way, or a fog rolling in off the lake. It cannot help that a recent rain has drowned the path ahead in mud and puddle, necessitating a time-consuming picking one's way across. The star cannot cause, nor can it prevent, detours, traffic jams, blizzards, 184-car train crossings, nor even families of geese who decide suddenly that they and all their uncles and cousins must cross the street in one long, waddly line during rush hour traffic. All of these are outside the star's sphere of influence. What the star can do, however, is offer a reason to look beyond. It can give us a reason to pause, to reflect, to consider. It can give us a general direction, even if a lot of winding, forks in the road, and sharp turns at cliff edges might make the getting there an adventure. The star can burn on through day and night reassuringly, a constant in an ever-changing world where detours appear out of nowhere, construction slows our progress to a crawl, and trail markers, fallen in the last windstorm, are no longer visible. The star is a reminder that, Although we may need to watch our feet as we walk along, lest we catch our toe on rock or root, we do need to stop sometimes and look up, reminding ourselves of the reason we are walking this road in the first place. Our God is in that star, drawing our gaze upwards, and our God is the one beside us, whose footprints keep us company in the lonely places of this journey. Our God is in the forest, the river, the roar of waves and the whisper of wind, the voices of the many who have come before and the many who will come after. Our God is there in the drip, drip of rain from a droplet bejeweled overhanging twig, and in the flit of wings in the bushes beside the path. On this journey, on this path, may we look for our God in all the places where God can be found, and find that God is not only in the star that guides us on our way, but also in our hearts, and the hearts of all who follow that star.